FeedBurner, when Google bought innovation and let it die. In the early 2000s, when blogging was exploding across the internet and RSS feeds were the lifeblood of digital publishing, three entrepreneurs in Chicago saw a massive problem that needed solving. Dick Costolo, Eric Lunt, and Steve Olakowski watched as content creators struggled with the technical complexities of RSS feed management, analytics, and monetization. RSS, or really simple syndication, was supposed to make content distribution easy, but for most bloggers and publishers, it was anything but simple. Managing feeds, tracking subscriber numbers, and understanding audience engagement required technical expertise that most content creators simply didn't possess. The trio founded FeedBurner in May 2004 with a revolutionary premise: make RSS management so simple that anyone could do it, while providing the analytics and advertising tools that publishers desperately needed to build sustainable businesses around their content. FeedBurner's solution was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of wrestling with complex RSS implementations, publishers could route their feeds through FeedBurner's servers, which would then optimize, track, and enhance those feeds automatically. The service provided detailed analytics showing exactly how many subscribers you had, which was impossible to determine with standard RSS feeds since they were simply XML files sitting on servers. FeedBurner tracked subscriber counts across all major feed readers, including Google Reader, Bloglines, and NetNewsWire, giving publishers unprecedented insight into their audience. The platform also offered feed optimization features like Smart Feed, which automatically detected the best feed format for each subscriber's reader, and browser-friendly, which made RSS feeds readable in web browsers instead of showing raw XML code. Publishers could customize their feeds with additional content, advertising, and even audio enclosures for podcasts. The service quickly became indispensable to the blogging ecosystem, with major platforms like Typepad, Blogger, and WordPress recommending FeedBurner to their users as the standard solution for feed management. The timing couldn't have been better for FeedBurner's explosive growth. The company launched just as the podcasting revolution was taking off, and RSS feeds were the primary distribution mechanism for podcast episodes. FeedBurner became the backbone of podcast distribution, handling feeds for shows that would later become household names. By 2005, the service was processing over 100,000 feeds and serving more than 50 million subscribers. Major media companies began adopting FeedBurner, including CNN, The Wall Street Journal, and NBC, validating the platform's enterprise capabilities. The company's growth was fueled not just by individual bloggers, but by the realization that RSS represented the future of content syndication across the web. FeedBurner's advertising network, launched in 2005, began generating significant revenue by inserting targeted ads into RSS feeds, creating one of the first successful models for monetizing syndicated content. The company raised $5 million in Series A funding from Mobius Venture Capital and Union Square Ventures, with investors betting that RSS would become as fundamental to the web as email. Dick Costolo, who served as CEO, had a background that perfectly positioned him to understand both the technical and business challenges of the emerging social web. Before FeedBurner, he had founded and sold Spionit, a web monitoring service, and had experience at companies like Anderson Consulting. Under his leadership, FeedBurner expanded beyond basic RSS management to become a comprehensive platform for content distribution and audience development. The company introduced features like FeedFlare, which added social sharing buttons and interactive elements to feeds, and Headline Animator, which created animated GIF banners showing recent blog posts. FeedBurner's email subscriptions feature allowed publishers to convert RSS subscribers into email subscribers, bridging the gap between RSS and traditional email marketing. The platform's PingShot service automatically notified search engines and directories when feeds were updated, improving content discoverability. By 2006, FeedBurner was handling over 400,000 feeds and had become so synonymous with RSS management that having a FeedBurner URL was seen as a mark of legitimacy for serious publishers. Google's acquisition of FeedBurner in June 2007 for approximately $100 million seemed like a natural fit at the time. Google was heavily invested in RSS technology through Google Reader, which had launched in 2005 and was rapidly becoming the dominant feed reading platform. The search giant saw content syndication as crucial to its mission of organizing the world's information, and FeedBurner's analytics capabilities aligned perfectly with Google's data-driven approach to advertising. Google also operated AdSense, the web's largest contextual advertising platform, and FeedBurner's feed-based advertising represented a logical extension of that business. The acquisition was part of Google's broader strategy to control key infrastructure elements of the web, similar to its acquisitions of YouTube and DoubleClick around the same time. Initially, the integration seemed promising. Google maintained FeedBurner as a separate service while gradually incorporating its features into the broader Google ecosystem. Publishers who used FeedBurner gained access to Google's massive advertising inventory, potentially increasing their revenue from feed-based ads. The problems began almost immediately after the acquisition, though they weren't apparent to users at first. Google migrated all FeedBurner accounts to Google accounts in 2009, forcing users to link their feeds to Google's ecosystem. While this provided single sign-on convenience, it also created a dependency that would later prove problematic. More concerning was Google's gradual neglect of FeedBurner's development. The platform that had once been known for rapid innovation and feature updates suddenly stagnated. New features became rare, and existing features began to show their age as web standards evolved. Google's focus had shifted to other priorities, including the development of Google+, which the company saw as its answer to Facebook's growing dominance in social media. RSS feeds, once viewed as the future of content distribution, were increasingly seen as a legacy technology, as social media platforms became the primary way people discovered and consumed content. Google's neglect of FeedBurner reflected a broader industry shift away from open standards like RSS toward closed platform ecosystems. The decline accelerated as Google made strategic decisions that undermined FeedBurner's value proposition. In 2012, Google announced it was shutting down Google Reader, the feed reading platform that had driven much of the demand for RSS feeds. This decision sent shockwaves through the RSS community and signaled Google's abandonment of RSS as a strategic priority. Without Google Reader driving feed adoption, the audience for RSS content began to shrink dramatically. FeedBurner's subscriber counts, once a source of pride for publishers, started declining across the board as casual RSS users migrated to social media for content discovery. Google made matters worse by removing FeedBurner integration from Blogger, its own blogging platform, and eliminating the FeedBurner advertising program that had provided revenue for many publishers. The company also deprecated the FeedBurner API, breaking third-party applications and services that had built on top of the platform. These decisions weren't just neglect. They represented active dismantling of the RSS ecosystem that FeedBurner had helped build. Technical problems mounted as Google failed to maintain FeedBurner's infrastructure adequately. Users reported frequent outages, slow feed updates, and broken analytics tracking. The service that had once prided itself on reliability became increasingly unreliable. FeedBurner's statistics, once considered the gold standard for RSS analytics, became notoriously inaccurate as the system failed to keep up with changes in how feed readers operated. Publishers noticed that subscriber counts seemed frozen or wildly inconsistent, making it impossible to gauge actual audience size. The platform's spam filtering became overly aggressive, sometimes blocking legitimate content, while its abuse detection systems failed to keep up with evolving spam techniques. Google provided virtually no customer support for FeedBurner issues, directing users to community forums where problems often went unresolved. The company also stopped updating FeedBurner's interface, leaving it looking increasingly dated compared to modern web applications. Publishers who had built their content strategy around FeedBurner found themselves trapped with a service that was deteriorating but difficult to abandon due to the risk of losing subscribers during migration. The writing was on the wall for years before Google finally announced FeedBurner's end of life. In 2021, Google quietly updated FeedBurner's terms of service to indicate that the service would be discontinued, though no specific timeline was provided. The announcement came buried in a support document rather than through any formal communication to the millions of publishers who still relied on the service. By this point, FeedBurner was processing feeds for an estimated 2.5 million publishers, including many who had been using the service for over a decade. The discontinuation notice sent publishers scrambling to find alternatives and migrate their feeds, a process complicated by years of technical debt and Google's failure to provide adequate migration tools. Some publishers discovered they had lost access to their original feed URLs, having relied entirely on FeedBurner for feed generation. Others found that their subscriber data was incomplete or inaccessible, making it impossible to understand the impact of migration on their audience. FeedBurner's demise represents one of the most significant examples of Google's pattern of acquiring promising services and then abandoning them when they no longer align with corporate priorities. The service that once powered millions of blogs and podcasts became a cautionary tale about the dangers of building on platforms controlled by large technology companies. Google's neglect of FeedBurner wasn't just harmful to publishers, it contributed to the broader decline of RSS as an open standard for content syndication. While RSS still exists and is used by many publishers, particularly in podcasting, it never regained the mainstream adoption it had in the mid-2000s when FeedBurner was driving innovation in feed management. The collapse of the RSS ecosystem has led to greater centralization of content distribution through social media platforms, giving companies like Facebook and Twitter unprecedented control over how information flows across the internet. Publishers who once enjoyed the independence of RSS syndication now find themselves dependent on algorithmic feeds controlled by platform companies, with little recourse when those algorithms change. FeedBurner's story serves as a reminder that innovation doesn't automatically continue after acquisition, and that the fate of essential internet infrastructure often depends on the strategic whims of a few large corporations rather than the needs of the users who depend on it.